Welcome to the H.I.T podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As we do every week, we're dropping into your feed with what I hope are bite-sized, digestible, really well-curated conversations going on in the space. This week's episode will be no exception. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions. And without any further ado, I want to jump into my conversation with Maren Perry. Maren, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Toby. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So I think just maybe to give the audience a quick overview and kind of orientation into some of your professional CVs, can we get the Maren Nickel tour? Give me the overview.
Sure, the elevator pitch. Here you go. So I'm the founder and CEO of Arden Coaching. We're a leadership development firm that works nationwide with organizations to develop their leaders across the employee life cycle. So individual coaching, teams, and group training programs.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think one of the things that, really intrigued me about your expertise is just kind of your background in developing leaders and in kind of where maybe some of the missteps are. So I guess just a kind of broad question to open us up, but when you think about leaders developing in today's space, if you're a human resources professional and you're thinking about the leaders across your organization and you're thinking about kind of folks that are either recently raised up or raising up or have been in leadership for quite some time, what's maybe something that comes to your mind with respect to furthering the development of those leaders?
Every organization is different, but I would say a lot of organizations focus on the individual over the system. So they're looking for, how can we give training to those managers or, those couple leaders, or we're having issues in that department, rather than looking at the whole system and what they're creating in the environment of leadership and what solutions they have throughout the whole organization. So I would say more could focus systemically rather than individually.
What does that look like when you talk about focusing systemically? You're talking about just kind of a regularly cadenced, ongoing leadership development? Are we talking about bringing folks in?
All of that potentially, really just looking to diagnose what the organization needs. Some organizations need more courage to have more candid conversations. Some need more targeted forms of communication. Some need building capacity in their leaders so that people aren't burning out and they're actually, passing on these leadership skills. Every organization is different in what they need, but if they're reactive to, that person needs developing or that level needs developing, then they're ignoring the fact that no one ever tells us, I wish I'd had this later in my career, right? They're ignoring that they're not developing people along the way. And so everyone reaches some point where they're maxed out, where they have reached their maximum capability. And a lot of HR is not looking enough across the entire system, I would say.
Well, how does an organization or even an HR professional then flesh out, when you say every organization is different, do we need conversations on tough conversations, this, that, and the third? How would one flesh that out?
Well, we actually use our own organizational assessment to flesh that out.
Yeah.
We've developed it over time for that exact purpose. Not to be too self-serving, but
no. But I think that's great. And even if you're like, hey, listen, use us or don't use us. And by the way, would love to throw up how to get in contact with you. But like you're saying, perhaps an outside consultant can be an answer to that, right? And a good one that's got a good
data.
Yeah.
Wherever you get it, you need data.
Yeah.
So we have a way to get the data, but if you get the data internally, great. You need data about how people are actually performing across the entire organization, across a level, across different forms of leaders in your organization. You need to know what's going on. So you need data to start with. And most people don't have data. They have like correlational data, right? I hear this from these people. I hear in this department, this is happening. I notice over here this, but they're not actually getting consistent and reliable measured data.
In your experience, when people are using just kind of their ear to the ground and then they do a good, robust, appropriate data extraction, how closely do those often map to one another? Or are folks genuinely quite surprised sometimes at what their ear to the ground would have told them relative to what the data says?
That's a great question. I think it usually is close, like it can lead to, like, I hear something over there,
Yeah.
right? So their ear is to the ground. They're not wrong, right? They're accurate in hearing something. Are they able to see the root cause, or are they seeing the surface symptoms, right? So what we're trying to do is help organizations get underneath what they see as the symptoms. So a really quick example would be, organizations say, oh, well, we have an accountability issue, right? Our leaders aren't holding people accountable. They're not getting the things done that they're supposed to get done. Okay, that could be what's going on. In that kind of case, often what we see is, well, if we dig a little bit deeper, what we find is that the reason you're having an accountability issue is that the leaders are afraid to have difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not about information. They know what there is to say to people. They're just afraid to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're talking about collective courage as a value that is not being expressed in the organization. When you start training people in courage, that's very different training than here's 10 ways to hold someone accountable.
Right.
So you're going to end up with something that impacts at a deeper level and moves the needle in a more significant way, because typically it's not that people don't understand the concept of accountability, right? They understand the concept.
Sure.
They're just not applying it. And so you have to get at the root cause of why are they not applying it? That's one example, but usually that ear to the ground is the right direction. You just have to make sure you're going deep enough to get at the really root cause.
Yeah, my question was actually going to be to give me an example, so I'm glad you went there because it was the first thing I was thinking as you were talking about that. Do you find, and if you do, how do we tackle this? But I guess we'll take these questions in order. A level of resistance when you guys identify what might be an issue and a good, leadership development coach or business partner has come in and they're trying to, sort of lead a horse to water here type of a thing. And, what are common levels of resistance and effective ways to manage that?
I think by the time someone reaches out to us, they've identified something, whether it's the ear to the ground version, the deeper version, the data version, they've identified something. Sometimes it's not the person who contacts us that has the greatest level of resistance,
That
right?
was
They're
kind of my
selling
thought.
it to someone else.
Right.
And sometimes the pushback is about time. Sometimes it's about money. And all of those things are the same, right? Whether you're taking someone's time or their energy or their money, you're asking something of people. And I think, honestly, while the partners that we work with are lovely, I think that the places we see resistance are when people don't understand that human beings are slow to change. We're just not great at it.
Yeah.
And so it takes more time, it takes more energy, it takes more touches. That requires more investment. And it's not just investment of money, it's investment of time and leaders understanding and how you communicate it through the organization. All of that takes a level of commitment that does ask something of the organization. It is not simply hire someone from the outside, have them wave a magic wand, do a couple hours of something, and things transform. It's not how human beings learn. We learn with more touches, with more practice, with more application. And that's an investment on the company's part, regardless of what that investment is, whether it's internal or external. It takes a commitment to make it stick.
Yeah. So, I guess granting the premise that it's not a magic wand and that there is a time facet to it, are there ways to speed up or slow down even within, again, it's not going to be an overnight thing, but does it need to be a year-long thing? Can we make it a couple-month thing? Like, how do organizations do this better or worse?
It really depends on what level you're trying to work at. But yes, generally, I would prefer more shorter touches than one long touch, right? So if you're saying, look, I have the capability to pull people offline for 6 hours, I would not say do a 6-hour training.
Right.
I would say do 4 hour-and-a-half long sessions, or break it up with some training and some small pod coaching, right? So that people have different ways to apply what they're learning. So it's not just a download of information. The forgetting curve will tell us that that's going to be gone in a matter of days or weeks. So we need more touches to reinforce it. That's the overall premise, I would say. More smaller touches.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's kind of the premise of the show here too, right? Where I'm like, hold on, we can't. I
Right.
often joke that the best way to tell a man nothing is to tell him everything. Like I just overwhelm you with a ton of information. You're like,
That's
I
right.
didn't hear anything. Like,
That's
but if you
right.
can keep it, do a certain topic. But I guess that's a decent segue question, which is, if you come in and you diagnose that there's a few almost disparate. If they're correlated, you could probably mush them together into one sort of session. But if a couple of these things really truly live on their own, do you just kind of power rank them and take them one at a time, or do you find a way to do point number one and point number two? If it's not really 1A and 1B, if it's one and then there's
Yeah, yeah.
two, like how? Because probably there's more than one thing going on, right?
Generally, yeah, and things evolve, and you don't solve it once. This is an ever evolving ecosystem. Right? This
Yeah.
is something that takes place forever, continual learning. Um, the logistical answer is you can do either. I mean, you can talk about two different things in a day or a session or something like that, but it's really the application. So if you're going to download a whole bunch of information and never talk about it again, then no, I would do them separately. And you may need to prioritize. You cannot solve everything in a go, right?
Right.
Or in one program, and things take time.
What level of leadership development is sort of all hands or widespread or super surgical? Or do you want to kind of, even if it's in a much more diluted or bite-sized way, give kind of everybody the idea that we're doing this thing, and then maybe you drill in more and more specific up the ladder? Or how do you connect pods and teams and leaders and big groups?
Yeah, yeah, it's a super question. So we talk about leadership as taking place in three domains: self leadership, relational leadership, and strategic leadership. Strategic leadership, you're not going to train everyone in the whole house on strategic leadership. That probably comes with your job title. That's going to be at the upper end of the house. Everybody else, self leadership, like your self awareness, your communication style, that's everybody.
Yeah.
Relational leadership, difficult conversations, developing others, execution and accountability, those are all leadership dimensions that apply across the board. So they will increase in number as you get towards the top of the house. Whereas the program size will decrease. As you get towards the top of the house, you're probably getting more one-on-one attention
Right.
on a greater number of dimensions, as
Right.
opposed to at the bottom of the house, you're getting a lot of touches,
Yeah.
but on fewer dimensions and probably in group programs, right? Just investment wise, that's what makes sense. And also, you need exposure to the concepts. Hopefully, by the time you're an SVP, you've been exposed to some of these concepts
Right.
and you're reiterating and deepening your learning. But when you're talking about first time managers, you need exposure. You need that content provided. It's not just about the one on one attention.
And then let me get your thoughts on the idea that there are clearly, many people who focus on being an external partner that comes in and they bring in some version of leadership development and team cohesion and all these sorts of things. And as an organization, maybe battling the perception that we're just kind of maybe constantly willy-nilly bringing in kind of one disparate guy after another over time, or like, do you do this on an annual basis and maybe start to make it regular, and you've vetted and brought in the right arc for the next quarter or year or whatever? Like,
Yeah.
how does an organization balance this looking like just another harebrained, here comes some folks coming in to holler at us again, versus like a through line almost?
Yeah, I think that you need a strategic leadership development plan. And the best relationships we have with our partners are the ones where we can come in and help them craft, like, what's your 5-year plan look like?
Yeah.
What do you need based on where the company is going, how many new leaders you have, how many external hires, how many internal hires? What is the level that you've been focusing on so far? Who's totally ignored, right? But crafting a really strategic approach so it isn't willy-nilly. It's
Right.
not, well, reactive. This group needs something. I have to go hire for that thing. And this looks like a decent program, right? Or I've worked with that person before, so I'm going to bring them in for this one thing. If you're not putting it in a whole plan, you are going to do it willy-nilly.
Right.
If it's in a whole plan, then whether you're using one vendor, 18 vendors, no vendors, doesn't matter, because you're surgically applying throughout your program.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe just before we get out, or is there any other, kind of leadership Marenisms that you have come to develop over time that I haven't led us to with a question directly, but that you say, this is actually kind of an important thought?
Oh my gosh. We say insight plus action equals results.
Okay.
And so every program needs to have a component of insight, which is twofold: information and what I call revelation. Information is the data piece.
Yeah.
Revelation is how does that apply to me? Like the aha moment. That's the insight. Then there has to be action. There has to be application, doing it in your real job with real organizational pressures, all of that, all of those components. Insight, action, that's what's producing the results. So good leadership development programs will have those components in order to produce the results.
That's awesome. How can folks get a hold of you if they're looking to reach out?
Sure. Well, you can find us on our website, which is Arden Coaching, ARDEN coaching.com. And you can follow us on LinkedIn, Arden Coaching. And my name is Maren Perry. I'm on there too.
I love it. Maren Perry, thank you so much for joining us and for being so generous with your wisdom for the listeners here. I really appreciate just kind of going through some of the best practices and what's a really key part of any business being successful.
Well, thanks for providing many quick hits.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Well, that's all the time we have for you guys on this week's episode. Thank you to our sponsors, Rula, Excel Health, True Hue, Montage Insurance Solutions, the guys keeping the lights on. We're blessed to be here. Thank you guys for joining us. Join us next week. Join us every week. And until next week, make this the best week yet.